It's been about 18 months since we first started hearing stories of a strange new virus emerging in Wuhan in China. A couple of months later, and we had a global pandemic with countries around the world locking down. A year or so on, what effect has the pandemic had on your career and your jobs? What changes have you seen? Are you starting to work more from home? Have you decided that you really didn't like your existing job and you've made a complete change? That's what we're going to talk about in this week's interview. I'm Jeremy Klein, and this is Change Work Life. Hello and welcome to Change Work Life, the podcast that's all about beating the Sunday evening blues and enjoying Mondays again. Now, this episode is being recorded in March 2021, and that's around the first anniversary of the date when the UK went into the first lockdown at the start of the coronavirus pandemic. And this interview is the first of what I hope will be a series of interviews with people who have effectively used the pandemic as a catalyst to change career themselves. I'm really interested to explore what effect the pandemic has had on people's careers, whether it's forced people to change careers or whether it's made people want to change careers. So I'm delighted to welcome as my guest this week, Bryant of Lost Nomads Pizza, to talk us through his own career change. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So first of all, can you tell us a bit about Lost Nomads Pizza? What is it? I mean, clearly it's something to do with pizza. What's the setup?
The clue's in the title. Lost Nomads Pizza is a project that I've started with a business partner. We came up with the idea, I guess, October, November last year. And the idea really was to cater for festivals, parties, weddings, anniversaries. And between us, we bought a horse box, had it converted. We had a huge wood-fired oven built and installed in the back of the horse box. And by sort of Christmas time, we were all set to go. And then obviously, we know the rest, another lockdown. So that's kind of put a spanner in the works and a temporary halt to the whole festival, wedding party activity. So in the meantime, I'm basically working from home. The horse box is on my drive. It's all set up. It's covered in lights. And I'm offering a click and collect service 3 nights a week. And so far it's going brilliantly. We're pretty much sold out every night that we're open. The community in Hitchin here has been incredible. So much support from neighbours and, people just strolling by, wanting to see what's going on. And for a lot of people at the moment, coming out on a Friday to pick up a pizza is a Friday night out. It's a chance to talk maybe to another adult, which I think a lot of people are missing at the moment. Chance to stretch their legs and hopefully go home with a nice pizza. That's essentially where we're at the moment. Our plans are, to try and get involved with festivals and parties, etc. later on in the year when a normality returns, however that normality looks. But that's the plan.
Yeah, well, we'll certainly dig into that. I mean, it's certainly an interesting time to start this kind of business, and I'm very interested to find out about your thought process. But let's talk a bit about your backstory, because I gather you spent quite a lot of time working in finance.
I did quite a lot of time. I think it was about 22 years I worked for the same bank in the city. So I joined as a junior trader in the foreign exchange department of this particular bank.
Was this out of school, out of university? How did you end up in this?
Not directly from school. I'd had a couple of jobs previously, but they were much shorter term dips in and out of different environments. But I'd always wanted to work in foreign exchange. I think if I remember rightly, when we had a careers evening at school, a guy turned up and said, "Yeah, I work in foreign exchange. I'll be retired by the time I'm 35. And I thought, brilliant, that's exactly what I want to do.
So was it the opportunity, the making loads of money kind of thing that appealed to you?
Yeah, I like the idea of the excitement, the hustle, the whole busyness of it, and the fact that, potentially you could make money. The stress and all that hadn't really occurred to me. It was a case of, anyone who does it will walk away with a decent amount of money in the bank and a nice lifestyle. But clearly, it's not always like that. And some people get lucky. Most people don't. But that was what really appealed to me. It was a bit of a schoolboy fantasy. I didn't want to be a racing driver. I didn't want to be a Premiership footballer or whatever the Premiership was called then. I quite liked the idea of the city environment, which in a bizarre way was an unusual choice for me because I've always erred on the sort of creative side of things. I've played guitar for years. I've been in bands, more arty than I am numerical. And I never really fitted in to the sort of stereotype of the city worker. I didn't like the idea of dressing up in a suit and tie. Just didn't see the point, but I went along with it. And so, yeah, I eventually got this job working in a foreign exchange department in this bank, which at the time was an inroad into my dream job.
So what were the first few years like, sort of the first 5 years? I mean, was it kind of everything that you dreamt about, or did you start to think, yeah, I'm not sure about this?
Well, I think on my very first day, someone said to me, this job isn't necessarily difficult. It's the people that you work with that make it difficult. And I would say not everyone fitted that description, but there were a lot of very difficult people. There's a lot of big egos, a lot of personalities, and it's not a dealing room isn't a place for a shrinking violet. You've got to stand up for yourself. And in that respect, I will always be grateful of doing that job because it's very character building, toughens you up. It gives you a good experience of life and how some people are. But for the first 2 or 3 years as a junior, you are very much told what to do, when to do it, and you will definitely know when you've done it wrong. It's not a case of, oh, well, never mind, it'll be okay next time. You'll probably find out if you've done something wrong and you won't do it wrong again. You don't get the opportunity to do it wrong again. The environment was much more bullish than I'd kind of imagined it would be. But it was good fun. I won't lie. There were plenty of times when people would go out after work. We went to nice places, nice bars, nice restaurants. There were lots of upsides. It was good.
What was the career progression like, sort of as you moved up from a junior? What were the opportunities that you had?
As a trader, there's not really too many stages for you to go unless you want to start getting involved in management. If you want to carry on trading, you're essentially a junior trader, a senior trader. So that's pretty much the 3 steps. Then you could become head of a desk and start managing people, become sort of senior director level where you're more involved in overall strategy and policy decisions. But if you just want to stick to the basic trading side of the business, there's not really many places you can go. Once you hit a certain level, you're pretty much there.
And so what were your thoughts on that? I mean, were you intending to go up to management, or did you really want to stick with the trading?
Well, the problem that kind of hit my industry, the industry I was in at the time, is as technology advanced, the number of people, human beings actually doing the job decreased. And that, I'm sure that's the same across many, many, many industries. Everything became much more automated. Compliance issues meant that everything had to be input into systems rather than just written on a sheet of paper. Everything was computer-based. Previously, things would have just been written up on a whiteboard with a marker pen. That whole sort of hazard system of managing orders and things, that very quickly went out the window. And so the number of people involved dropped dramatically. So I think when I joined, there were probably something like 10, 12, maybe 15 traders and probably 4 or 5 assistants. And by the time I left the industry, there were 2 or 3 of us doing everything and doing more than we would have done 20 years ago. In terms of wanting to become a manager, there weren't many people left to manage. It's an international bank, Japanese bank, and senior management would come over from Japan, from Tokyo, and they were the ones that would make the sort of decisions and be more involved in the actual management of people. And we were kind of left to get on with the day-to-day running of the operations. In my mind, I didn't really have anywhere to go beyond where I was at. I've always been a people person. I don't really like that phrase, but I like talking to people. I like working with people. I like interacting with people. So I would have liked to have gone down the management route, but those opportunities just didn't exist and I couldn't see that ever existing.
So what were you thinking at the time? Were you thinking that you would just stick with what you were doing and that was what you would always end up doing?
Well, part of the problem of the job was, and I think this is going to probably strike a chord with a lot of people listening, is you get trapped. The money's quite good. You become reliant on it. It's not, I wasn't going out buying fast cars and speedboats, but we had a nice, comfortable existence. We went on some amazing holidays. We were lucky. Yeah, went to very nice restaurants, and that becomes your life. And without realizing it, it becomes what you expect, and that is your norm, and it isn't the norm. Those sort of things should be for special occasions or treats for most people, but you just get locked into that lifestyle. And then the sort of fear kicks in that if you no longer have that income, if you don't have X amount of money coming in, how can you possibly go to a 2-star Michelin restaurant at the weekend? How can you go on a 3-week holiday around South America? Those sort of things start to panic you. And all it really is not understanding what's important and what is surplus to requirements, I guess. The problem that myself and a lot of people in that industry find is they're used to the money coming in. They get stressed that they might lose their job for whatever reason, and it starts to impact on mental health. That in turn impacts on your performance. That increases your likelihood of not having your job this time next year, blah, blah, blah. And it kind of starts a vicious circle. And I found myself in a situation where I was working extremely long hours under intense pressure just to keep my job, not to get further along the career ladder. I was kind of paranoid. If I didn't put this extra effort in, that would be it. We wouldn't be able to afford shopping. We wouldn't be able to afford anything. And so it was an extremely difficult time at the end. You know, I really did find myself in a particularly dark place.
What happened? I mean, clearly something happened that made you go, not going to carry on doing this. So talk us through.
Yeah, a couple of things happened. And I guess, again, this is going to be the same for lots of people. The first big change was the birth of my son, which was 2016. So he came along and instantly your priorities change. You have an actual sense of purpose in life, and your purpose in life is to raise that child and look after and love that child. That is your priority. Previously, my priority had been make money for the bank. They'll pay me some. They'll give me a bonus. I'll go on holiday. I'll go to a nice restaurant. All of that went completely out the window for me. But at the same time, it added extra pressure because you've now got another life to support and look after. And everyone's different. But for me, I wanted the best pushchair for my son. I wanted the best Scandinavian wooden toys, you know, even though they finish up just playing with cardboard boxes and they don't care. But you still have that in your head that this is what you want and you're going to do your damnedest to get it. So that was a turning point in that my priorities for myself changed and I actually had a purpose. Then the next big event, I would say, was the birth of my second child, my daughter, in 2019. And I had a couple of weeks off work for paternity, went back to work, and I just thought, I've got no interest in this environment. It's hostile, it's ruthless, there's just no enjoyment of life here. Been at home for a couple of weeks with my family, and it really made me think, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I can be part of this system. And to sort of cut a long story short, it kind of sent me into a state of depression. And I have serious conversations with people about my mental health and where I was at and the root causes. And a lot of it came down to me not being happy with the environment I was in and really wanting to spend more time with my family and the people that mattered.
Was this, without wishing to pry too much, and please tell me if this is an appropriate question, is this sort of external help to assist you to realise that, you know, you weren't in the right environment for spending time with your family or that kind of thing? Is this sort of is this coaching or even sort of depression counselling or that kind of thing?
Yeah, it was counselling. I I've always been one of those people, and I think as a result of the job that I was doing, you were always expected just to get on with it. And I've always been one of those people that's just kind of push stuff to the side and let it build and build and build and hope it goes away, rather than just openly stand up and admit that there's a problem that needs dealing with. You just kind of think, yeah, I'm a man, I can get on with this, I can deal with it. There's plenty of people worse off. There's people with severe health conditions, there's people who've had all sorts of traumas and troubles in life that they get on with it. Why should I, as a city trader, be moaning, or why should I have these issues? There's no two ways around it. I really was struggling, and I went to see a counsellor, and she, in all honesty, didn't really say much apart from just tell me your story, talk to me, tell me where you're at. And she didn't really do anything apart from listen. And I just kind of sat there on a few occasions and talked it out. And I came away with the feeling that I'd answered my own questions. I knew that I shouldn't be in that environment. I knew that I was or had been chasing probably unachievable goals. I had focus on the wrong things. And there was a few other background issues as well, which just talking openly about them, solved a lot of problems. And I think it sort of made me realise that you quite often know that you're not doing the right thing, but you do it because you feel you have to. So what I'm trying to get at is, if you're trying to support a family member, for example, who might be difficult, you do it because you feel obliged to, even though it's a cost to yourself. And the same with work sometimes. It's almost like being in an abusive relationship. You keep going back, knowing what's probably going to happen, but hoping it doesn't. And it probably will happen again. And that's kind of the state I found myself in. Having these counselling sessions, it just helped me answer all these questions and explain it to myself.
So having figured out that you were in the wrong place, how did you start to answer the question about what was the right place?
Well, first and foremost, I have to say that my family, and I don't really have any family left. I actually lost my mother last year as well, which was all sort of happened at the same time. But my wife's family and my friends are unbelievable. They're so supportive. And having that kind of close support, family support, friend support, it gives you a little bit of confidence, and it gives you ideas, as to what you can do, because I've always loved food. I've loved music. I love travel. I love photography, all of these sorts of things. But I've never had the confidence to sort of think I can do that and actually make money out of it. I've been in awe of creatives. Nearly all my friends are creatives. They work in advertising, they're photographers, musicians, and I've been, as much as they're my friends, I've always been in awe of how talented they are and how they've managed to make a living, some better than others, but they just genuinely seem happier, than people slaving away with numbers. And so talking to my friends and family, it just made me think, what is it that I could be good at, and what would I be happy doing 5 days a week? What would on a Monday morning make me think, great, I'm going to do this today? And so I did a few courses just to be on the safe side with things like project management, business related, but not finance related and not creative. But I've done lots and lots of courses, which kind of helped with lockdown. It gave me something to do. And I've got 2 young children, so there's always something to do, but I like to keep busy. Busy. Doing all these courses gave me a sort of impetus to get through, and it gave me targets because I set dates for exams. So I knew I had to work to get these exams done, because I think all of a sudden, if you've gone from a really busy work environment doing nothing, it's so easy just to think, do you know what, I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll do it next week, or I don't know what it is I want to do, so I'll just watch telly.
So the missing piece here is presumably there was a point at which you basically said, okay, that's it, I'm quitting.
Yes. What actually happened was, when I effectively got diagnosed with stress-related depression, I had to take time off work. And that kind of went on over Christmas 2019 into the new year. And then, of course, the pandemic started. With all that and my mother passing away as well, I was sort of in a position where I thought, right, I don't think I can go back to work because I know it's bad for my mental health. I've pretty much lost my family now. And this pandemic on, who knows what's going to happen? What's next? Is this the end of the banking industry as I know it, with humans going to a dealing room and working, or is everyone going to be at home? And all these questions. And I just sort of thought the only answer I have is just to walk away from it and have one of those Etch-a-Sketch moments and just think, just start again. If ever you're going to do it now, because there's so many things lining up telling me to do something else. And it was extremely difficult, won't lie, because after 22 years of doing the same thing for the same employer, you become institutionalized. Again, I go back to the abusive relationship thing. You keep going back because you're frightened of what else is out there, and you don't know if you've actually got it good. You could have it terrible, but you don't know until you try. And I just felt in my life that all of these things had all come together at the same time, and I just had to do something about it. And so, I basically left my employer in last summer and started on these courses, which I thought would just give me a background to try something else.
So when you quit, so you didn't have something else lined up or something a project that you were thinking seriously about. So kind of what got you over the fear of, hang on, I'm quitting, I don't have anything else. I mean, how long am I going to be without an income for?
Well, I think it's kind of balancing two different fears. There's fear of I might not have any money, I might not get a job for however many months. But then there's also the fear of, if I go back into that environment, how am I going to finish up mentally? How am I going to be as a father to my children? How am I going to be as a husband to my wife? Because I think, sometimes work and employment can become all-consuming, and it just can take you away from where you're supposed to be. I'm a dad and a husband. I'm not a machine that makes money for someone else. And it was realizing the fear of going back was greater than the fear of trying something new that made me sign on the dotted line and say, right, let's just go for it. And another strange thing happened. I got a call just very randomly from a training company just saying, we're doing these courses at the moment. It's, 20% off, blah, blah, blah. It was project management. And I talked to this lady for about an hour and a half, maybe. And she sort of said, given everything you've done, you have all the necessary skills and abilities that you would need to be a project manager, and if you were to do the courses, do the exams, you would absolutely sail through. And it was that conversation that made me think, yeah, of course I could do that. It was having confidence in my own ability that made me think I definitely can do something else. And it kind of opens up other doors. You kind of look into, to say in my case, what a project manager might do, or different industries. And it got me into, only for a short term, I'll be honest, but learning how to program. I had a go at that, which then got me into software development. All the different things that I looked at, I had no idea that all these industries existed. I sort of sat on commuter trains in the morning looking at everyone thinking, what do? You can't all be foreign exchange traders. Why are you on the train? Where are you going? What are you doing? And it was that realization that it's a big world out there and there's so many things that you can do. And I think the biggest thing for me was realizing that you can be self-employed, be your own boss, and be happy doing it. You're not beholden to anyone apart from maybe the bank manager at some point, but on a day-to-day basis, you make your decisions, you do what you think is right, and it can be great.
I just want to go back to, so day one, kind of after you'd quit your job, what was going through your head in terms of your plan for what you were going to do next? I mean, what was your thinking in terms of, okay, so I've quit my job, I'm going to want to do something else, I don't know what yet, so these are the steps that I'm going to take now on day one. What did that look like?
I think I was trying to be very practical, and I literally thought, okay, I've spent years doing this job. It's very niche. I have to learn to do something else. What am I, 45? So I'm not especially young. I'm not particularly old. I'm kind of in that middle ground where I can still just about learn things without forgetting everything straight away. So I thought I've still got the ability to learn. So let's do that. Let's just look through courses. And there were things like, job sites like Reed, offering loads of courses, Udemy, I think that's how you pronounce it. Lots and lots of courses on there. And not expensive either. You're sort of talking 15, 20 quid, something like that. And I just thought I'm going to try and enjoy it, do something courses that I'm interested in or could become interested in, and just see what is out there. Because I knew in my heart I never wanted to go back to trading or that sort of dealing room environment. It was just, for me, it just wasn't going to happen. So I gave myself a sort of ultimatum, learn something new and just see what happens.
Had you set yourself any kind of deadline in terms of when you were going to start work of some description?
I mean, I'd say the only real deadline I set myself was my wife and I sort of sat down and we budgeted. We were like, right, we've got X amount in the bank. We can live relatively frugally. Like, I touched on before, we've got 2 kids. And it's true, they are as happy playing with cardboard boxes as they are with 50, 60 pound plastic robots. They just don't care. And in a way, the pandemic helped because there was nowhere to go and spend money apart from takeaways. We couldn't go on holiday, so that didn't matter. We genuinely were okay. It was like, for some reason, the weather seemed amazing. We were in the garden having barbecues. I was doing some courses. And in all seriousness, although it was a very, very tough time, it was a great time because it felt like things were happening, positive things were happening, even though there was a lot of negativity in the world. But it felt, because we were doing something about it, it was a really, really good, positive feeling. And I've come out of it completely changed from where I was this time last year. In terms of deadlines, we kind of thought, come this time next year, we might be struggling. My wife is freelance. She works in costume for films, TV. Obviously, that whole industry pretty much ground to a halt as well. So, yeah, I won't lie. It was a bit panicky. But again, I come back to where I said about, would I rather be at home panicking about what might happen this time next year, or would I rather be at work miserable, stressed, depressed? For me, there was no decision to make there. That was my only choice. I was just going to go for it, and what's the worst that can happen?
Let's talk about pizza. How, after all of this and all the courses and everything, how did you come to decide I am going to start a mobile pizza business?
It's quite a funny question to answer because I remember years and years ago, I think we were going through a recession, and my boss at the time, who I've always had a huge amount of respect for, he's one of the most talented traders, one of the most knowledgeable people I'd ever met. I remember him saying one day, do you know what? He said, I just wish I'd put my money in a pizza business. Because he said, when everything else goes wrong, people will always keep eating pizzas. And it kind of, I've always remembered him saying that. I can almost remember the colour of the tie he was wearing when he said it. It just kind of stuck in my head. And I've got a friend, it's actually my wife's husband, who I'm good friends with. He finished up in a very similar situation to me. He was working for a big corporate doing accounts and just did not like it, had enough. He quit a bit before me, actually. And he was going through a similar sort of process of trying to think of what to do. And yeah, he sort of called up for a chat one day and we were just talking about it. And just during this conversation, I think I said to him, yeah, I used to have this boss who said, when everything's going wrong, just buy pizzas. And it just kind of started from there. And we thought, well, let's just put some money into it. If it doesn't work, we'll sell what we've bought. We'll hopefully come out of it flat. If it doesn't work, if it does, great. We might actually make some money out of this. And so, yeah, that started the ball rolling and we bashed our heads together. and we got it up and running really quickly. But unfortunately, second, third lockdown weren't really what we were hoping for or expecting. So it delayed things a bit. But at the moment, I'm concentrating on getting the brand going. I've got an app which has just been developed this morning. I've just been messaged. So yeah, things are happening and it's good. And I love it. I genuinely love doing it. And bizarrely, I seem to be quite good at it, blowing my own trumpet, but I think you've got to if it's your own business.
Are you doing the cooking and the baking and all that sort of stuff, as well as the business side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I've never done this before. I've never had my own business before. I've never worked in food or hospitality. So a couple of weeks ago, I thought I'll have a soft launch and just message the people on my street. We've got a WhatsApp group, and I thought, 3 or 4 of them might come down. And it was fully booked. And it was fully booked the next day. And then people started turning up on the third day saying, we're not from your street, but we've heard from other WhatsApp groups, there's this guy making pizzas in a horse box on his drive. You should go and check it out. And then second weekend, we were fully booked. This weekend gone, fully booked. I'm taking orders now for Thursday night. And it's crazy. So initially, I thought it was just going to be myself doing it all. But pretty much from 10, 15 minutes after opening, I've had to rope my wife in. Now I've got someone else who's managing the oven while I make the pizzas, and I'm not expecting it to carry on, this busy all the time. I'm sure it's a bit of maybe beginner's luck, and also, like we touched on at the beginning, people want to do something new and want to do something at the moment rather than sit at home and watch Netflix. But at the moment, the support is there locally, and people are coming back if they can book a slot. And it's great. I love it. Absolutely love it.
There must have been something going through your mind. I mean, starting a business in effectively the hospitality industry during a pandemic. I mean, even if we weren't necessarily anticipating, the lockdowns at the start of 2021, there must have been part of you that thought, hang on, I just have no idea what the future is going to look like. I mean, why didn't that put you off?
Do you know what? I think it was just a case of I didn't put a ton of pressure on myself to make it work. Maybe I was a little bit blasé and I've got away with it. But I think a lot of the problems that people have when it comes to changing jobs or changing their lifestyle is unnecessary pressure, whether it's pressure that they put on themselves or their families put on them or, their environments put on them. I think I basically took the stance that if it works, brilliant. If it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. Do something else. The difference was this time that I realised there were other things to do, and I didn't expect this business to be as successful as it is at the moment. I thought it would work because I've always liked going to festivals. If I was going to a wedding and there was a pizza truck, I'd be hanging around that pizza truck all night. And I know I'm not the only one that thinks that way. As it turns out, Hitchin seems to be a town that absolutely loves pizzas. So I've kind of struck lucky there. But I just thought, if the worst case scenario is we have to sell the pizza truck and the oven and we'll probably get our money back because it's a nice looking thing, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, that helped me start it with a sort of positive frame of mind. And I think you have to go into any project like this thinking it's going to work, but at the same time being realistic that if it doesn't, okay, do something else. And I've also spent a lot of time, it's not that I've spent a lot of time in lockdown with freelancers, but I've spent more time at home in Hitchin seeing how small independent businesses come up with different ways to make things work. And I'm hugely in awe of all these businesses who've started doing click and collect, Sunday roasts. I don't know, they're finding ways to make it work. And I think if you have that kind of drive, you've got something pushing you forward like that, it will make your business so much better than it would have been otherwise. It's quite easy to become a little bit blasé and just, oh yeah, people will come, we're a nice pub, we serve decent beers, everyone will come. When you've got to change your marketing and your strategy as a business to get people to come, that's what I think makes the difference between a really successful business and one that will probably just fade away into nothingness I think this whole pandemic has been the ultimate test of what makes a good business a good business. And a lot of businesses won't come out of this, which is a shame, but maybe they wouldn't have lasted anyway. It's a horrible, harsh thing to say, but maybe we do need a bit of a clear out. Maybe it is time that lots of things that aren't necessary go. And people have a proper reevaluation of what is important, what is good, what is sustainable, what is good for the environment. And I think this is kind of what's driven me on, is that if I can make it work in this environment, it will be great. Once festivals are back on, once parties are back on, fingers crossed, I'll get some bookings and that will be my business. And I think if you're going to dive into something new, straight in at the deep end and see what happens.
It's almost impossible in the current environment to predict what's going to happen in the future. But if we assume we get to a place where we have some kind of normality, where we have festivals and shows and weddings where you can have more than 10 people or whatever it is, and that kind of thing. I mean, do you have a 5-year vision for your business? Is it just going to be kind of like a lifestyle business, just sort of you rocking up to these things and serving pizzas, or do you have plans to expand it beyond that?
My next plan, or next part of the plan, I think is probably to get another 1 or 2 horse boxes and find similar towns to hitch in and do a similar sort of thing there, train some people up and kind of franchise the brand. Again, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I think if you do something well, and I think the way that my setup works is that it looks good and it's in keeping with the environment it's in. It's a vintage horse box. It's got fire and smoke coming out of it. It looks good. It smells great. It's covered in lights. It's a nice looking thing and it fits where it is. And I think for me as a business going forward, I want to try and find similar sort of environments, little towns that are supportive of local industry and independence. And I think that is going to be the way forward. People realise that they've got to look after their own, and small businesses all support each other. And I've always sort of thought everyone would be in competition. But as soon as I set up Lost Nomads, I thought I want to get involved with other small businesses. And because I know now where they're at, I want to help them. If I can promote them, they can promote me. And it's a great little business network that everyone gains from. The community gains because they're getting passionate people making their dinner, making their coffee, whatever, serving their drinks, They're getting people who care and you get a better service. And I think going forward, hopefully, we're going to have more independence back on the high street. Probably most likely to be food, hospitality related rather than shops, unfortunately. But Amazon tells us what we want to buy and when we want to buy it and how many minutes before it gets delivered. So I don't know what's going to happen there. But I do think in terms of the hospitality side of things, independents are going to really come back strong. And I'd quite like to be part of that, to be honest.
Chris, this has been an absolutely amazing story. I mean, aside from having the counselling and the support of your family and friends, are there any other resources, books, quotes, just something else that you can point listeners to that have really helped you in your journey?
That's a good question. I think one quote that I've always liked, and I think it was, the old favourite Churchill. And I think he said, if you're going through hell, then just keep going, with the idea that you're going to come out of it at some point. And I did quite often think, how am I going to get out of this situation I'm in? It sounds bad. I do feel bad for saying it because the reality was my lifestyle for a lot of people would have been incredible. They would have thought, well, they've got this, they've got that, they've been here on holiday, but it doesn't, all of those things don't give you a good mental health. And I wasn't in a good place at all. And not having any money for a while hasn't bothered me because I've spent time with my kids. I spent time with my wife. I've spent time listening to the radio. I've spent an awful lot of time trying pizzas, way too much time trying pizzas. But I really did feel like I was going through hell. And I now feel I've come out of it 1,000 times happier than I thought I would have been ever. So there's always light at the end of the tunnel.
That's amazing. And where can people find you? Where can they find Lost Nomads Pizzas?
One thing I'm not good at is social media and advertising and that sort of business. Best way to find us at the moment is on Instagram, Lost Nomads Pizza. And there are links there where people can order for click and collect. We have got a website under development, but it will happen when it happens. At the moment, we're extremely grateful for all the local support we've been getting. The word seems to be spreading street by street, which is fine. But yeah, Lost Nomads Pizza on Instagram is a good starting point.
Awesome. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Chris, thanks so much for this conversation and good luck with it as we come out of this pandemic. Best of luck with the business.
Thanks ever so much. It's been good talking to you.
Okay, hope you enjoyed that interview with Chris Bryant. I don't think there can be many interviews where I've nodded along with what my guest was saying quite as much as I was as Chris was talking. So much resonated with me, the fact that he was earning well and had fears about leaving that behind if he changed jobs, the impact that starting a family has on your outlook, and ultimately the realisation as a result of the pandemic that now is a great time to make changes. Clearly, quitting your job without having something to go to, as Chris did, isn't for everybody, but certainly starting to think, to plan, to set the scene for what you might change to, that's definitely something that we can do straight away. And it's worth bearing in mind what Chris was saying about the pressure that we put upon ourselves to make things work. We've touched on it before, but when you think about it, what is the worst case scenario? What really can go so badly wrong? Chances are, when you think about it, it's not going to be that bad. You're going to get by, you're going to make ends meet. There will be alternatives out there if things don't go to plan. So I hope that was helpful and maybe gave you some inspiration if you've been thinking about changing career as a result of what's been going on over the past 12 months or so. As I mentioned at the start of this episode, I'm hoping that this is going to be a short series of interviews with people for whom the pandemic has caused them to make some substantial changes to their career and their plans. And I'd also love to hear from you. If you've got a story about the pandemic and how it's affected your career, or maybe you know someone who's changed as a direct result of the pandemic, well, I'd love to hear from you. If you go to changeworklife.com/contact, there's a form there and I read every message and I will reply to you as quickly as I can. As always, you'll also find the show notes for this episode on the website. They're at changeworklife.com/95. We're getting a lot closer to episode 100 and I've got something special planned to mark that. So make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And I can't wait to see you next week when we've got another great interview for you. Cheers. Bye.